people have ruined it. Who knew celebrities before they were famous? How different do they act now? My grandpa, RIP, owned a grocery store in Miami in the late 70s. Wesley Snipes and his friends once stole some candy from his store, and when he caught them he let them have it. Since then Wesley and his friends were regulars. Once, Wesley left his bike in front of the store and it got stolen. Was a pretty bad area. My grandpa gave him his old bike that he kept in the back of the store. My uncle took over in 2001 when my grandpa died. In 2007 he came back to the store while my uncle and cousin were there to ask about my grandpa. My uncle said they talked for a little over an hour about how my grandpa treated him like a son. When he found out my grandpa passed he felt guilty he didn't visit sooner. He embraced my uncle and cousin and left. My uncle said he told him they plan on having the building repainted while they talked. About a week later a crew of painters arrived and told my uncle they were already paid to have the building repainted. Such a genuine dude. This is awesome. You hear so much about how disconnected he is and just smokes a ton, but it's nice to hear he remembers those who helped him in the past. I went to high school with Sandra Oh. She was funny, dynamic, smart, outgoing, and very into drama. In one school play, she played what I will call sort of a mime character. She didn't have lines but was still a big part of the action, commenting on what was going on through her actions. Anyhow, in one scene as she was exiting the stage she banged her head on one of the props. You could hear the loud bang, but she was a pro and just carried on. It has been great to see her have such success, and I love that she has kept in touch with her close friends from high school. You can spot them at awards shows sometimes. I knew someone who went to ACM with Ed Sheeran. He said he was lazy in class, skipped classes and just wanted to smoke weed, and my acquaintance was mad when Ed started getting more and more famous when Ed didn't even bother with his music courses. I thought that was funny. Work at a restaurant about 15 years ago as a manager. Rachel McAdams walked in for an interview. She was still in acting school and serving table to pay for it. She worked at my restaurant over the course of the next 2 summers, serving on our patio. Still friends to this day. She hasn't changed a bit. Still bikes to get groceries. I can't get over how funny she is. I still think Regina George in Mean Girls is one of her best roles. I went to the same high school as Chris D'Elia. He was a dork, but still arrogant. He worked on the yearbook and gave himself like 3 or 4 pages so he could write his fatuous observations and pretend it was comedy. So that hasn't changed, but in other ways I guess he has changed. He never had fricked high schoolers back then. Okay, that's good crap right there. My aunt used to work with Gordon Ramsay's mother but never made the connection. Once they were out for lunch and he ended up coming in to see his mum and met my aunt in the process. She said he was so lovely and polite. Plus my dad has a bunch of Gordon's old jumpers he didn't want anymore. Not signed or anything like that. It's just a fun family story now. I went to college with Joe Keery aka Steve Harrington in Stranger Things. He was my college boyfriend's sweet mate and just the nicest guy. His hair has always been dreamy and amazing. Last time I saw him was at a viewing of The Hateful Eight after we graduated and he still made a point to come over and say hi. Obviously we can't know a person's true nature from their screen presence, but I admit that I would have been shocked to hear that Joe Keery was some kind of butthole. Friend of mine was friends with Tom Hanks in high school and went to prom with him. He still writes her personalized B-Day cards on one of his typewriters. I hope one day I'll be so rich and successful that I can afford multiple typewriters. I went to junior high with Norah Jones. She was the most sincere and serene person. She was fun to talk to and she never gave a hint of who her father was. The night she won all those Grammys was very telling that she hadn't changed a bit. I believe this. I've met her twice after her shows and she was super nice and took pictures and signed autographs. Once she had a little dog with her. I didn't expect someone as famous as Norah Jones to actually come out and meet fans after her show, but she did. I went to high school with Mark Ruffalo. He was nice. He was one of those thespians. Our high school had an acting group that challenged the students to get out of their shell and do things in front of strangers like introducing yourself as the wild fairy of the woods and presenting them with a flower. We didn't talk much, but like I said, he was a good guy. His son went to school right by where I live and someone I know's brother was one of his teachers. Apparently Mark is still a really down-to-earth, good guy from their interactions at parent-teacher conferences and graduation. I went to school with Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley from Harry Potter. I was into acting too, so we had done a few school plays together. He was really nice, very chill, a good laugh. I haven't seen him since school days, but he kept coming to classes whenever he wasn't filming, was always happy to chat about the movies. Sometimes he'd need a little break from so many people wanting to talk, and would come and hang out in the library, and honestly, you'd never know he was in the biggest film series at the time. Honestly, I think a lot of these answers boil down to if they want fame or not. Rupert loved what he was doing, but didn't care about being famous and having people kiss his ass. Just a nice normal kid. He used to live in a town not too far from me. Everyone seemed to think he was a recluse and a bit of a moody prick, but I think like you said, it can be tiring having people come up to you all the time, and he probably reasonably wanted some quiet for himself. Went to middle school with Megan Fox for a bit. She rode my bus and she mostly kept to herself. Most of the guys would fight over who was going to sit next to her, but she was very shy and didn't really have much to say. A co-worker of mine met Daisy Ridley while on a backpacking trip. Got to know each other pretty well while traveling together. She told my co-worker that she wanted to become an actress. Looks like that panned out pretty well. They said Daisy was an absolutely lovely individual. I knew Brett and Jermaine, Flight of the Conchords, back in the late 90s early 2000s, and met Taika Waititi a few times too. I was a big fan of his art at the time. There was one painting of someone in a bathtub that stuck in my head. I knew Brett better than the others, because he was in a reggae band with my good friend Barnaby. As far as I can tell, they are all exactly the same. I was local production contact on Hugh Jackman's touring theatre production where he sang his favorite numbers from various musicals. Usually when a show comes in with big name stars, the star usually has a bunch of assistants and they do the job they are paid to do, and that's it. The actor come on stage when needed, then back to their dressing room, and if you need anything or if they need anything you talk to the assistant. Prior to the first performance, I am on stage dealing with a few little issues, trying to stay on schedule when Mr. Jackman walks out on stage, and my first thought was that he was going to be angry that we have kept him waiting to do his sound check. Instead he walks directly over to me, introduces himself, asks me my name and asks a couple of questions and doesn't even mention the delays. So we spoke for a few minutes and then he went around and introduced himself to more of the local crew. I was a little blown away by meeting him as I am a fan and thought that was really cool of him. Fast forward a week and I am backstage after the performance and I bump into Mr. Jackman in the hall. I say hi but don't want to bother him, but he stops me. He remembers my name after meeting hundreds of people that week and asks a few questions that related to our first conversation. Here's the thing though, the guy just did a 2-hour performance and instead of just politely returning my greeting he stopped and talked for a few moments with no false sincerity. To this day I am still blown away by how genuinely nice he was and always wondered what he was like before he became famous. He would also spend a huge amount of time after the show signing autographs and answering questions at stage door. I live in the town where Dolly Parton grew up, and practically everyone above the age of 50 who grew up here claims to either be a distant relative of Dolly's, or they claim to know her in some way. Everyone has their story of the time they met Dolly. It's pretty obvious, but regardless of who you talk to, Dolly has always been sweet and generous, but everything has simply grown exponentially due to her fame. Examples are the millions of books she gives out for free to children around the globe each month, or how she gave out $10,000 cash to many of my close friends after their houses burned in a fire a couple years back. Thousands of people are employed here and work for one of the businesses she owns, and it's a tad strange to see when you walk in, but the birthing center at the local hospital is funded by and named after her. I honestly can't think of one person I know who doesn't like her. Dolly's heart has only gotten bigger because of fame. My grandmother worked at Dollywood for many years and met Dolly a handful of times. When she died, Dolly sent 24 or so roses to the funeral home. She's a real gem. My mom used to ride the bus to work in downtown Cleveland with Steve Harvey's first wife. Apparently she supported him while he was trying to get his career started. And then basically as soon as he got successful he divorced her for a younger woman. My mom always hated him because she felt that he treated his first wife like crap and always yells bastard at the TV when he pops up. I told my mom that the internet likes her and hates Steve Harvey, so you've made her day. I've never heard a story about Steve Harvey that makes him seem like even a slightly good person. My dad went to school with Steve Irwin, reckons he was exactly the same as a young fella. He would be away from school all the time on trips with Bob to rescue and rehome crocs all over Australia. No good at footy but 22 years on this planet and the worst thing I've heard about Steve Irwin is that he's a crap footy player. What a gem. I knew Robert Pattinson about 15 years ago. Nice guy, friendly, a lot of fun to be with. He lived by himself in the centre of Soho, London, in a tiny one-bed flat that I think he felt like the romantic vision of a starving artist, or at least wanted to. He had a weird side. He'd say random, violent, depraved things. He was obsessed with Jack Nicholson. He never really gave a frick. He had confidence and he was always himself, and he knew he could be deliberately contradictory and he used that as a personality trope. But he was a good guy, and I get the impression he's very comfortable with himself now that he has developed his career, that he acts very well, and that he can pick and choose his roles based upon what he wants to do and who he wants to work with. Twilight for him was always a means to an end, and I think he worked it very much to his benefit, and didn't compromise himself. Bruno Mars's mom was a bartender at a local karaoke dive bar that I was a regular at the time. His biggest hit was The Hook for Billionaire by Travie McCoy. Anyway, she was selling tickets for an upcoming concert he was having and she asked our table if we wanted to buy some. My friend declined and she exclaimed, "Why not? He's my son." I ended up getting a couple of tickets despite not knowing any of Bruno Mars's songs. It turned out to be one of the best concerts I've ever been to. The guy knows how to put on a good live show. The tickets were only $40 each, I think. His opening act was a local group of large Polynesian men singing Motown who went by the name Nesian 9. They were pretty good too. The next time he was in town for a concert, he had blown up and the tickets were going for $400. I would have loved to see him again, but not at that price. His mom was really nice, down to earth, and a pretty good singer herself. R.I.P. Bernie. At least she lived long enough to see her son's success. The whole family sings. I went to school with his sister Presley and I remember wondering what she's up to. Found out her and the sisters of the fam started a girl group. I probably looked this up 5+ years ago, so I DK what she's doing now though. My grandmother and mum were really good friends with George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley from Wham. They got invited to concerts and got to sit in special seats, etc. And a few years ago me and my family stayed with Andrew Ridgeley in his guest house in Cornwall for a weekend. But they seemed to me like they stayed really nice to my grandparents and mum. And Andrew Ridgeley was very kind to my family when we met him. I miss George so much. I wish he would have been the one to do the reunion tour with Queen. His version of Somebody to Love is spot on. My co-worker's dad grew up with Queen Latifah in North Jersey. His whole family loves her because they were about to lose their house, so she paid it off for them. They've never said a bad thing about her. Queen Latifah, if this gets back to you, thanks for what you did for your friends in NJ. Phil's a really cool guy. My mom is friends with Johnny Knoxville's cousin. She met him once and had no idea who he was. She said he was nice and funny as all heck. She didn't realize until years later she'd even met him until I showed her one of his movies. From what I gather he's a normal dude and pretty hilarious. One of my aunts actually dated Bill Gates for a bit. I believe a few years before things took off for him. She said he was too into her or something like that at the time and weirded her out, I guess. Sorry about the lack of detail. Kesha, total nerd, 1600 on her sats. Quite a bit of a social outcast. Nice, though. You could tell she cared about others and wouldn't ever hurt a flea. My heart breaks for her in her recent situation. I love her music and wish her the best. My brother used to play basketball with a bunch of people in high school. Among those who would sometimes join in was Pete Davidson. My brother said he got ripped on a ton and no one really liked him. But that might just be because he wasn't great at basketball. I met him last year while he was out with his friends. I didn't want to say anything till my mom rolled down the window and asked if I could get a picture. We were in the parking lot. He was on FaceTime with someone and he told them that he would call back later and he took a picture with me. Really nice guy. There seems to be a lot of actual celebrities that stayed perceptually genuine after gaining fame. Meanwhile, now I personally know a few social media influencers who seem to talk down to anyone that can't afford to live in LA. I just find it interesting. When you are famous for your talent, rather than your follower count, I suppose it's easier to stay grounded, because you aren't constantly thinking about how it could all disappear. I went to high school with Post Malone. We graduated the same year. He always wore a suit to class and was that nerdy dedicated kid. Glad to see how his life turned out. I hope nothing for the best for him and now I listen to him all the time, haha. I'm just a rando to him though. We never really talked. Typo. You knew pre-Malone, dang. I went to high school with Emma Chamberlain. She was a huge bully in high school and pretty much a brat who thought she could get away with whatever she wanted before she got famous. Her parents were divorced, which led to them both always trying to be her friend and never actually parenting her, so they basically let her do whatever she wanted. When she said that people from her high school made fun of her because she was poor and that the parking lot was all BMWs and Range Rovers, I lost my mind because she was the bully in high school. And while the school definitely had some wealthy students, it was mostly a middle class crowd. This person isn't famous per se or has always been the same level of famous, but my brother and I went to school with Wes Cage, Nicolas Cage's kid. He would attend class with 1-2 bodyguards who, looking back, I think did double duty as sober companions. He ran circles around them and my brother became really good friends with him. Some of my favorite stories are as follows. 1. Wes and my brother were at Wes's home and Nicolas Cage ended up daring Wes and my brother to drink spoiled milk with him. So, I can safely say my brother drank spoiled milk with Wes Cage and Nicolas Cage. 2. They snuck away from the bodyguards and went to hide out in the mini movie theater in the house. That's where Wes's dad kept this very expensive and old whiskey that he'd only open for Christmas. So what did the kids do? Bust open the liquor cabinet and drank it all. I remember my brother coming home drunk as a skunk that day, at age 16. 3. Then God, do I wish I had this tape, but my brother, Wes, and some other kid made a video reenacting Romeo and Juliet. They were kissing each other, making horrible jokes, and so forth, and as if that wasn't bad enough, the camera panned to Wes's mom, who was dressed in what could only be described as bondage attire. The teacher quickly had turned it off in class because it was so inappropriate. I wish I knew how Wes was doing now. He was in my drama class and really good at acting but seemed to hate it. My brother ended up dead at age 20 and last I heard he had lost contact with Wes shortly after high school. It's coming up on 10 years of him being gone. He'd be 30 this year. It is weird for me to think about and has been on my mind much more frequently lately. Dang, this took a turn at the end. Sorry to hear about your brother. I knew Cillian Murphy back in secondary school. We didn't go to the same school but mingled a lot. He was a few years older than me. Dude was super quiet, but really dang friendly. I remember when he was cast in 28 Days Later and people were pretty hype for him, but a good few people didn't think much of it. Once it came out though, a lot of people changed their tune when they could see him actually act amazingly. I had a teacher who taught Drake. Apparently he was a nice kid but then got really douchy when he started getting famous. My father is a long-haul trucker. Knew James Cameron in his 20s when he was a trucker too. Said the guy was always insanely smart and would go out and basically take every engine apart and put it back together, so if you needed your rig fixing and he was around you'd search him out. They stayed friends and we actually got to visit him in LA over Christmas once. Now we live in Europe so don't think they talk much, but he's really smart and intense, although not what I expected him to be like from the stories on his movies. When my dad was in the army, he and some other army members were invited to the filming set of Saving Private Ryan. They were asked to show the actors how to hold guns and how to act like real soldiers. He told me that he met Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks during his time there. He said that both of them seemed like nice people, but said that Tom Hanks in particular was incredibly down to earth, genuine and has a great sense of humor. I know this is after he became famous, but it's nice to know fame didn't turn him into something negative. My mom knew Seal as far back as when he was still trying to be an architect, and she says he was always really nice. They didn't stay in touch. She moved away and they were never close, but she said he went out of his way to foster genuine connections to people before and after his music started to gain traction. He always had star quality. Everyone from the most important person in the room to a janitor walking through would be drawn to him, and he'd engage with everyone in a way that really stuck. She always mentioned that he was just a really sincere, deeply felt person. My bio teacher was friends with Rainn Wilson, Dwight from The Office. They used to grab coffee often around the time The Office started. From how she described him, Rainn seems like a pretty down-to-earth guy. I went to high school with Dacre Montgomery. He was a dong with a huge ego in high school, and I saw him recently when he came back to his hometown, and seems like he's still a dong with an even bigger ego now. I can't watch Stranger Things without rolling my eyes every time he comes on screen. Well, he was a dong in Stranger Things too, so he must be committed to his role, I guess. My parents went to high school with some of the family members from Duck Dynasty, and apparently they were clean shaven and had a very preppy look to them. When watching the show, I just cannot picture them being preppy high schoolers, no matter how hard I try. They Larry the Cable Guide up. My dad was good friends with Johnny Depp back in the day. It was around when he was first filming 21 Jump Street, the show, not the movie, lol. My dad says he was really humble and kind and always paid their bar tab. Apparently he was quite generous in giving out lots of free quality tea at parties too. Well, this took a turn in the end, lol. My ex-boyfriend's mom ran a pizza shop that Pink worked at as a 16-year-old. I guess she would always be singing randomly at work. She'd use spoons, utensils, anything she could find to use as a fake microphone. But she was a crappy worker and would straight up walk out on her shifts whenever she wanted without telling anyone and somehow not get fired for it. She just didn't give a f even back then. I had a friend in high school whose cousin is Kendrick Lamar. He's said Kendrick's pretty much still the same guy, acts the same around friends and family, just with millions of dollars now. I totally believe that. Allegedly he visits his old high school all the time, to the point where it's normal to see Kendrick climb the halls. I met Noah Centineo when he was in Austin and LA, so that was a little before he started becoming big. I don't know him very well, although he did once babysit me, haha. But I also know his mom, as she is one of my mom's closest friends. My mom does still see Noah sometimes and says he hasn't really changed, and that he comes to his mom's events sure says something. Still a sweet gentleman. Peas. Kelly Centineo, though, I do know well. She is amazing. I worked as a production assistant on one of his films, and he was super nice to everyone in the crew, even the lowly PAs. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.